Boker Tov to everyone. Here we go again. Gemarah Sanhedrin. I don't know why, but last week's shiur for Gemarah had the most views of any Gemarah shiur that I've ever done. Normally, we get about 8 or 9 people live, and then I usually get about, 20 people watch the recording. So we're talking maybe 30 people. For some reason, last week's Gemarah shiur has had 37 people watch it, which means we've got almost 50 people learning Gemarah at our snail's pace. It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, but I had to watch the last bit again because we couldn't. The share screen didn't work, and I presume others had to do the same.
So that's what it is. So you're doubling up. Oh, you're spoiling the numbers, Michael, or improving the numbers.
Sorry about that.
Very good. Anyway, we must be doing something right because people keep watching it. We also had, interestingly enough, 239 people watched the recording of Rabbi Cordozo, even though the recording was not really very good at all because of the internet in shul. And we had about 70 people at the event, so that was really very good as well. Anyway, let's have a look at some Gemarah. We will put the screen right away. If I can find it, there we go. Please tell me when you've got the screen. Yeah, okay. So we ended last week's shiur with this here. The bottom of 14a, we said over here, Rabbi Shimon Vav lo darish. Rabbi Shimon was not interested in giving an explanation for every Vav in the Torah. We spoke about the Vav meaning and being able to be expounded upon. And we mentioned at the end of last week's shiur, we mentioned Marcel's Bar Mitzvah Sedra, Ve'eleb Hamishpatim, and that's the most famous Vav, which joins all the halachot in Sedra Mishpatim, which are the civil justice laws, joins them to the 10 commandments which were given at Sinai. And the reason it says Ve'ela is to tell us that they were all given there. It wasn't just the 10 commandments, it was Ve'ela and all of these as well. But Rabbi Shimon in this particular situation does not darshan out the Vavs. So this is where we left it. So we're over here in the Gemarah. It's right at the bottom of 14a. It's on page 73 in the Steinsaltz Gemarah, if you're following in that. If you're in the Vilna Shas, it's right at the bottom of 14a. Ela me'ata. So if so, what does it mean if so? What are they talking about when he says if so? Well, in order to know that, we have to go back to the beginning of this little part over here, where we've got our little S to the top of this page. If you remember, this whole discussion was about how many judges were required to measure the distance between the corpse that was found and the closest city, because the closest city has to do the ceremony of Egla Arufa. And we had 2 opinions, I'm sure you remember. Rabbi Shimon said 3 were required. Rabbi Yehuda said 5 were required. And they both used the fact that the plurals were used in Zekeinecha, which is plural, and V'shoftecha. Rabbi Shimon says Zekeinecha means 2, and you can't have an even number, so they had to want to make it 3. Rabbi Yehuda says, I'm also going to darshan V'shoftecha, which is also plural, judges. So 2 for Zekeinecha, 2 for Shoftecha, your judges, that's 4. Can't have an even number, so we'll add 1, make 5. That's where their opinions were. So the Gemarah now goes down and says, if so, meaning if that's the case, that you are going to say that every plural means two, well, what about these verbs? Vayatsa'u, and they went out, or they will go out, I mean, and umadadu, and they will measure. Let's get the whole pasuk up, shall we? Let me show you the whole original pasuk, which is in Dvarim, chapter 21. Let me just get it on the screen for you. Got it ready here. There we go. Let me just share it. Okay, you got it? Yeah, okay. So this is the pasuk. Then your elders and judges, oh, I'm not doing your work for you, Leon, you could do it. Verse 2. You're muted at the moment. You're muted, Leon.
Right. Your elders and judges shall go out and measure towards the cities that are around the corpse.
So let's have a look at the Hebrew and see how many plural things we've got. Remember, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he says plural, 2 for Zikanim, 2 for Shoftim. That's 4. Rabbi Shimon says Shoftim, actually, we don't have an extra 2 because Shoftim describes the kind of Zikanim that we're having. He uses Shoftim, if you remember, to tell us that it needed to be judges of the Sanhedrin. But we've got 2 more plurals in this pasuk. Where are they? Where are the 2 more plurals in this pasuk? We have shown 2 plurals so far, and they are nouns. Zakanim, elders, and Shoftim, judges. But there are 2 verbs as well, which are plural. Vayatsa'u, and they will go out. And umadadu, and they will measure. They are plural. Can you see that, everyone? So how many plurals do we have? We've got vayatsa'u, that's 1. Zakanecha, that's 2. Shoftecha, that's 3. Umadadu, that's 4. 4 lots of plurals. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, how many judges should there be if he's being consistent? 4 lots of plural. 4 times 2 is 8. Can't have an even number. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it should be 9, not 5. He's picking and choosing. He's saying, no, he's saying Zakanecha is 2 because it's a plural. Shoftecha is 2, it's a plural. But he doesn't say, I want another 2 for the 2 verbs. And that's the Gemarah's question. Michael, you're not happy with that?
I think the only two relevant ones seem to be the elders and the judges.
Okay. I tend to agree with you. But, and of course, remember, the Gemarah often asks questions in order to knock it down. So that's what's happening here. So that's the Gemarah's question, but you understand the question, even if you don't think it's a great question. You can see there are 4 different plural expressions here, 2 verbs and 2 nouns. And the Gemarah wants to know why Rabbi Yehuda is being selective. So let's go back to the Gemarah again. Going to be a bit of chopping and changing here. Okay, so the Gemarah says, Ela me'ata. If so, in other words, if plurals are 2, we're in the Gemarah here down at the bottom of the page here. Vayatsa'u, shnayim, the plural verb and they went out, that should be 2. Umadadu, and they measured, shnayim, that should be another 2. The Rabbi Yehuda, it works out then that according to Rabbi Yehuda, Hare Tish'ah, he should have 9, like we said. Ula Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon okay, he doesn't do shoftecha. He's got another reason for shoftecha. So he should have not 3, but he should have 7, because he should be adding in another 4. 2 for yatzeu and 2 for umadadu. So that's the question of the Gemara. So hahu mibai lechidetanya says no. That's not the case, because they're going to use, just as Rabbi Shimon used shoftecha for something else, for a different deduction, they are going to use these expressions v'yatzeu and umadadu to teach us something else. And once it's taught you something else, it's no longer available to be darshaned for a plural. So what is it that they're going to learn from these 2 verbs? V'yatzeu, they will get, and they must go out. They shall go out. Who's they? Who are they referring to? Shoftecha and zakeinecha. They're referring to the judges. So what does it mean they shall go out? Says the Gemara. Hein velo shluchan. That means these judges, these elders, have to go and do it themselves. They cannot send an agent to do it for them. You might think that this task is a little bit beneath the elders and the judges. So they will send an employee of the court, a court surveyor, to go and do the measuring. Says this brisa, no, the word vayatzeu comes to teach us that they must go out themselves, them and not their agents, not their shluchim. And umadadu, and they must measure it. Now, this answers a question that we asked a week or 2 ago, and to which I think I gave you, initially at least, a wrong answer. I think I corrected it after that because I learned on in the Gemara. Somebody asked, I don't remember who it was, but somebody asked whether this measuring only took place if there was a doubt. In other words, if it was found very obviously just outside the city of the borders of one city, and it was obviously closest to Netanya and not to Herzliya, let's say, then there would be no need for measuring. And I said, yes, that's probably true. You would only need to measure it if there was a doubt. And then I read on, and actually it's not true at all what I said. This word umadadu, and they shall measure, means sha'afilu nimtza, over the page now, ba'alil la'ir. If you're on in the Vilna Shas, you're on Yud Daled Amud Bet now, right at the top. Even if it's found, this corpse is found close to the city, ba'alil la'ir, tzarich la'asok b'medida. Don't look at the notes on the left-hand side of the page. So the Gemara is saying that by using this term umadadu, and they shall measure, this is an imperative. You have to go and measure, even if it's obvious what the answer will be. Now, without looking at the notes on the side, why do you think that there is a necessity to measure when it's obvious which is closest?
Maybe there could be an argument at some stage when it moves a little bit further and further and further. And there could be an argument, even though it might be obvious, somebody might say it's not, or there'll be an argument later on, well, it wasn't really that, it was closer to the other place.
So what you're saying really is that if we say you can't, if you say you don't have to measure it if it's obvious, then that's leaving it to interpretation. And therefore, to make sure we don't have any monkey business, we're always going to do it. That's what you're saying, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's yeah.
I agree. I think that's a very good reason for doing it, because you're not then. It's a bit like lahavdil. It's a bit like cricket, right? At the end of a cricket match, when you know it's going to be a draw, right? I mean, you can start the 5th day, and you know it's going to be a draw because there's still 3 innings to go. You had 4 days of rain, and you start the test match on the 5th day. You know it's going to be a draw. But you still have to play the days out. You can only shake hands with the other side and call it a draw within the last half hour. Okay, up till then, you've got to carry on playing and do it. And so it's a bit like that, really. Even if you know it's dead close, you've still got to go and measure it. But in order that when it isn't obvious, there's no argument. You just go and measure it, and that's it. So I think that's a very good answer. It's not the answer that Steinsaltz gives, and it's not the answer that Art Scroll gives, but I think it's a very good answer, Michael. So that can go in my first volume of Chidushei Poleg in the name of Michael Krauss. Okay, anyone else want to suggest a reason why you should have to measure this distance even when it's obvious that it's closest to city A rather than city B? Well, let's have a look at what the Steinsaltz says, because this is an interesting piece of psychology. He says the purpose of this seemingly superfluous measurement is that if the elders of the great Sanhedrin come personally to the area and become involved in the case, the matter will become known, and perhaps witnesses who saw the incident will come forward and identify the murderer. So this is, if you like, the very first, earliest episode of Crime Watch, or later as it became known, Crime Watch UK. Anybody ever used to watch that? What they used to do is they used to have senior police officers coming on the TV and talking about the crimes that they were trying to solve in an attempt to get people to come forward with new evidence. And this is Crime Watch. This is exactly what Rav Steinsaltz is saying the purpose of this measuring is, even if it's obvious. If it's not obvious, then the reason for it that measuring is because you need to know the answer. But if it's obvious and you know the answer that it's closer to A than it is to B, then the idea is that people will see this performance going on, and no doubt there was some kind of kerfuffle if the elders of the great Sanhedrin show up in your area, then that's probably a big deal. I don't suppose they turn up in every little village every 5 minutes. So the idea being that this will jog people's memory and encourage witnesses to come forward to try and solve the crime. So I thought that was really an interesting piece of psychology from Rav Steinsaltz. The Art Scroll has a different explanation. Leon, do you want to share that with us?
Yes, their answer is if it says it in the Torah, it should be done. So verse 2 that I read out before says it, and therefore it's got to be done anyway.
That's right, because the point being, one sec, Marcel, I'll come to you in a sec. The point that Leon has said there, which is paraphrased the Art Scroll, and of course this makes sense that it comes from Art Scroll because this is their approach, quite rightly so, and that is that you have no right, or we have no right. We have no right to decide whether a mitzvah in the Torah is relevant or not. Torah tells you to do it, you do it. Okay? You may say, it's obvious, we don't need to measure. Well, if the Torah tells you to measure, you measure. So that's the simple answer. It's a bit like, I think I mentioned this the other night at the it was at the Shalashudas. I mentioned it a week or two ago. They had a program. Every now and again, the anti-Brit Milah brigade raise their head and try and cause a bit of aggravation. And when they do that, daytime TV likes to get involved, and they have debates and all sorts. And there was a daytime TV program with Jeremy Kyle, who did a debate as to the rights and wrongs of circumcision. And they had all sorts of people on. They had the anti-Brit Mila brigade, who said it's an assault on the child, and you had the Muslim Moyalim, and we had Dr. Yossi Spitzer, who is a London GP and head of the Initiation Society in London. He was on in representing the Moyalim. And so Jeremy Kyle says to Dr. Spitzer, so tell me, Dr. Spitzer, why do Jews do circumcision? And he said, because God said so. And that was all he said. And then Jeremy Kyle said, well, that's the end of that discussion then, isn't it? Which it was, because he was, there's no debate to that. He was expecting them to say, well, there's good evidence that it's healthy and it prevents penile cancer and it reduces the incidence of cervical cancer in the partners of men who've had circumcision, blah, 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 blah. Well, those things may or may not be true, but that's not why we do circumcision. We do circumcision, we do Brit Milah because it is a mitzvah in the Torah to do it, because God said so. And this is the same sort of thing, really. This measuring business we do because the Torah says so. And it's not for us to decide when we should and shouldn't do it because we don't need it anymore because it's obvious. The Art Scroll also gives another reason, and that was that it's basically playing for time. They're playing for time. In other words, they're doing this measuring business, and presumably it took a little while, and you had to get the great Sanhedrin people. They don't suppose they were just twiddling the thumbs waiting to be to be called for this. They had to make an appointment, and then they had to get there to the area and do this whole performance of measuring. This all took time. The idea being a bit similar to what Rav Steinsaltz says, that there's more time to investigate the matter, and it may become clearer either through witnesses, as Rav Steinsaltz said, or because the killer himself will give himself up. It will be more time for the matter to be resolved, and then they won't need to do this Egla Arufat thing at all. So it's a bit similar to what the Meiri has said, quoted by Rav Steinsaltz. In that they're playing for time. They want to try and solve the crime rather than leave it as an unsolved crime for which you have to do the Egla Arufat. So there you've got two different approaches. You've got the approach of well, God said so and that's it, and then you've got the approach of saying, well, let's use a bit of crime watch psychology to try and solve the crime. Marcel, you wanted to say something.
It's two questions in one here. First of all, this obviously took time to bring them to do it. What happened to the guff in the meanwhile? I mean, did they just leave it out in the open? Or did they temporarily bury it where it was? Or what did they do with it? That's the first question. And the second question is that obviously this was a very important thing because it wasn't a private matter like a marriage or a divorce. It was a public matter between two towns. So was it actually recorded anywhere that we know of? I mean, the Gemarah speaks about these things and it's all recorded in the Gemarah, but this happened before the Gemarah. So, or was happening at that.
That's a good question. The first question.
Articles anywhere, any scriptures?
I don't know. The first question, let me answer the first question. I'm sure that the first question is that they buried the body. They would not have, the body would not have been left hanging around. The body would have been buried, and any inquiries that needed to be made would be made after the body is buried. In the same way as we do today, you don't not bury a victim just because you haven't solved the crime. There are plenty of murder victims who are.
But it wasn't totally for the purpose of solving the crime. It was for the purpose of responsibility of who was responsible for receiving the goof.
No, it's really the responsibility of yes, who would deal with the body, and also, but more so, who was responsible for the murder.
Yeah,
that was the shame of it. So I understand your question. So town A says, well, I'm not burying it because it was closer to town B, and B says, no, I'm not, it's closer to you. We'll have to wait till the judges come. What we're going to do with it? Well, we've got the mitzvah of covered and mace, so I'm sure it would have been buried. Maybe it would have been buried in a temporary grave and then moved later on. I don't know, although that's problematic as well. To move a body once it's been buried is not straightforward either. It's a good question. I don't know. Don't know. I'll have to try and find that out. And the second question, whether it was recorded, I don't know. We could do with David Marks. We could do with the equivalent of that of the Kohen Tanakh to tell us that, and whether there was anything in the Near East recorded about Egla Arufa and the measuring. I don't know, Marcel. It's a good question. I'll leave you to do some research and enlighten us next week. Although we could still learn next week. Yeah, I don't know the answer to either of those questions, but I'm certain the body wouldn't have been left around; would have been buried somewhere. Two good questions there, Leon.
Yes, I have what is printed as the second edition of the Art Scroll. I don't know whether your edition is the second edition or not. The second edition was printed in March 2002. You see that about the third page.
Yes, I have that. I have the second edition, second impression.
Right. There's a mistake in the footnote. The footnote number 1 on the 5th line, it says, look and see which city is closest to the calf. That's a mistake. What they mean is the
corpse. That should be the corpse.
Yes. I thought
I think you need to write to Art Scroll, Leon.
Yes. I thought you might have had a more recent edition.
No, I've got the same edition as you with the mistake. Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So, so then he goes on to say that they're playing for time. So basically, you're playing for time, you are doing a crime watch, or it's because God said so. Yes, Marcel.
If I'm just remembering from a couple of weeks ago, that might not be a mistake. Didn't we discuss a few weeks ago that there was different parts of the body they measured from?
Oh, you mean closest to the calf? You think that means the calf of the person?
I don't know. It just jumped into my mind.
I don't think that's an interesting way your mind works there, Marcel. I never even thought of that. I don't think it means that. I think it means, it reads very obviously that it means the corpse, but it could be the calf of the corpse, but I don't think so. Don't think so. Well spotted though. Right. So now we understand why.
Johnny.
Yes, David, you've got some information for us? Oh, you're frozen, David. We can't hear you.
Problem my end. I think so. I'm losing you every so often. Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Yes. Try again. Start from the beginning.
Okay. To go into more detail on this subject, we need to learn the last deals exclusively with this. A couple of First of all, that the dead body was actually buried, I don't know when, but on the spot where he was actually found, to the extent that even if his body was in private land.
Okay, David's breaking up. What David is doing is he's jumping to the end, towards the end of Sanhedrin. If you have a look, we will get there probably in about 20 minutes time. Yeah, we've lost you again, David. You're frozen. So I'm just paraphrasing what you're saying. It's coming from the end of Sanhedrin. Page 88 and 89 deals with this in great detail. So we will get there eventually, but it may take us about 20 years. And there is a chapter there, right, which deals in very great detail about this. And David is, oh, he's gone now. He's probably come back in a minute. And he will, and he's read on to pay. There we go. Here he comes. Let's see. Try again, David. You're muted now.
Right. It's actually there's a whole chapter devoted to the subject at the end.
No, we've lost you again, I'm afraid. Okay, so it's in right at the end of Sanhedrin. We will get there in the end. I haven't read it up fully, but David has told us that the body is buried where it stands, where it falls, even if it's in private land. What else have you found, David, in that chapter? No, he can't tell us. He's all frozen. Right. We will move on and we'll come back to David when he gets some better internet. Right. So, according to what we've said in the Mishnah, we said in the Mishnah, David's getting back in now with a different phone, I think. Hang on. Right, David, try again. David, try again.
Okay, can you hear me?
Try again, David.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay.
David, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right, try again. Let's try again. Go ahead.
Okay. It's actually the last. First of all, it's the last perek in Sotah that is completely devoted to the dinim of Eglah Rufa. And in a Mishnah in that perek, to answer the second question, unfortunately the dinim of Eglah Rufa were suspended at the end of the time of the second Bet HaMikdash, because unfortunately there were so many murders that took place in Eretz Yisrael, the courts couldn't deal with them.
Wow. Wow. So do we have any recorded events of Eglah Rufa?
Again,
other than in the Gemarah. What Marcel was asking was, are there any court records other than in the Gemarah?
We'd have to investigate. As I said, the place to look is in the last perek of Masechet Sotah.
And I've done
Okay.
Sotah. I don't remember
You were saying that the body is buried even in private land, wherever it was found.
Yeah.
And that's also in Sotah, because I think that's also mentioned in Sanhedrin, page 88, 89. That's quoted here as well.
Okay.
Very interesting. Okay, I didn't know that. So there you are, Marcel. It's buried where it falls.
I'll go back and look at Sotah. I've learned Sotah last year, so I'll go back and have a look at that because it's interesting.
Yeah, okay, let's see if we can find some more information on that. Right, very good. So let's go back to where we were up to.
There's actually a comparison between the suspension of Egla Arufa, which appears in Masechet Sotah, and the Sotah itself, and again the ceremony of the Sotah was also suspended for the same reason, that unfortunately there were so many suspected women of committing adultery at the time of the second Bet Hamikdash, that the ceremony was suspended by the Bet Din.
Don't seem right, that, to me.
Nor to me, but that's what the evidence is in the Gemarah.
So if somebody, I suppose, so if enough people commit a crime, it stops being a crime. Is that what we learned from that? Doesn't seem right, does it? Doesn't seem right.
I agree.
Okay, that's very interesting. Well, maybe we should learn Masechet Sotah when we finish Sanhedrin.
It's a fascinating Masechta.
It is.
I've never learned it. I've never learned it. And at this rate, probably never going to learn it. But we'll carry on in our own way, bringing bits from everywhere. Thank you for that, David. Maybe we can just jump a bit next week and have a look at Sotah. I'll have a look, and maybe we can, even if we just maybe learn the appropriate Mishnah with the Kahati commentary, which usually summarizes the Gemarah. That might be worthwhile. I'll have a look anyway. That's really interesting. Thank you for that. Right, let's go back to where we were. So we've now learnt in our Mishnah right at the beginning, and this is what we've been talking about, that there needed to be 3 or 5, depending whether you believe Rabbi Shimon or Rabbi Yehuda, 3 or 5 judges to measure this distance. And so the question now is, were there anybody else? Was there anybody else there? Oh, that didn't sound right. Were there any other people there? Was there anybody else there? Was it just the judges? They went on their own. Was this done in chambers, as it were, or in camera? Or was this a public thing? Or who else was there? So there's a Mishnah, a Brisa, which goes against what we learned in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah seems to indicate that it was just the judges. So let's have a look what the Brisa says. Matnitin de la ki haitana. Our Mishnah is not in accordance with that Tana. Which Tana? Well, you're going to see in a minute. This Tana who learns the Tanya, who learns in a Breita. So he's bringing a Breita now. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer. This gentleman, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, says, "V'yatzeu zekeinecha v'shoftecha." What did we say? We said, this is Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, our Mishnah says, zekeinecha are judges. Shoftecha means the great Sanhedrin. Okay, that's what we've already learned. This Brisa says something completely different. He says, zekeinecha zu Sanhedrin. That first zekeinecha is not to teach you judges, it's to teach you right bang straight in. That's the Sanhedrin. No messing about. So if that's the Sanhedrin, what you're going to do is shoftecha then. So it says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, zekeinecha zu Sanhedrin. Shoftecha, your judges, ze melech v'Kohen Gadol. This is the king and the high priest. Wow, that's amazing. So who turns up to do this ceremony? The entire power base of the country, the king, the high priest, and the great Sanhedrin. That is like the funeral of the queen, that. Everybody is there. Everybody who's anybody is at this Egla Arufa thing. No wonder they had to do away with it, because the king and the high priest would have been traipsing around the country with a yardstick trying to measure stuff. They never get any work done. So it's a rather strange suggestion, this, in my humble opinion, from Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, but that's what he says. Yes, Marcel.
Is there a distinction made between a guf which is obviously just dropped dead because of a heart attack, old age, or because they knew he was ill, or someone who's had treatment, something done to them where you can see it's a murder?
Well, we're talking, generally speaking, about a murder victim, aren't we?
Yeah.
Because the whole point is that, as we've said before, is a matter needs to be sorted out as to who was responsible for the death.
Yeah.
So I think it's assumed that this is not a natural death. Although how you know that, I don't know. I mean, maybe he was poisoned. But the whole Gemara reads to be talking about an unnatural death, a criminal death.
Yeah.
But I think you have to assume that everybody is in that category until proved otherwise, really, because you're not going to know who's the victim unless they've got they've got outward marks. If he's had his head chopped off, then it's pretty obvious. But what if he was, poked in the tochus with an umbrella that had poison on the end of it? These things happen, You've got to be careful about these things. You wouldn't know, would you? You had a bit of polonium up the tochus with an umbrella. So I think the assumption is that this is a murder. Right. So according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the whole Sanhedrin and the king and the Kohen Gadol are going to do this job. And he brings a proof. Dichtiv. And it is written, Melech b'mishpat yamid aretz. That is from Mishlei, from Proverbs. Let's go and have a look at it. I got it ready for you. And I'm sure Leon has got it ready for you as well. Let me get it on the screen. Mishlei, there we go. Mishlei chapter 29, verse 4.
Through justice, a king establishes a land, but a man of graft tears it down.
A man of what?
Graft, hard work, graft.
That's an interesting translation.
Yes.
Look at the Hebrew. The first bit makes sense. Melech b'mishpat yamid aretz. A king, through justice, establishes, from the word amod, to stand, like ya'amod, stand up, makes the land stand. In other words, justice keeps the land in check. That makes sense. The ish terumot yehersena. A man of trumot will destroy it. What does trumot mean?
Donations.
Yeah, a truma is a donation. So it says in this pasuk here, if you are a man who gives donations, you are tearing down a city. That can't be right, can it? So it must have another meaning. What else does trumot mean? Trumot, as well as meaning donations, is also means to volunteer, doesn't it? Let's have a look. Rashi says, Trumot, a haughty man who does not care to take time in judgment. In our rabbis in Ketubot stated, if the judge is like a king who does not have to acquire friends and accept bribes, he establishes the country. That's because he will judge in a just manner. He's not trying to impress anyone. But if he is like a priest, who asks for trumot in the threshing floors, he tears it down. Okay, I understand now. It doesn't mean ish trumot, a man who gives donations. It means ish trumot, a man who receives donations.
Okay.
And that's absolutely right, isn't it? If you are a judge who is somebody who relies on your living for donations, if you're a Kohen and you rely on the people to give you your truma, because of course the people can choose who they give their truma to, which Kohen. They have to give it to a Kohen, but they have to choose, they can choose which one. So you're going to want to ingratiate yourself, aren't you, to somebody on the basis that if you're nice to him, he'll be nice to you and he will give you his truma. So when it says ish trumot yehersena, it doesn't mean a man who's giving out donations. It means a man who is receiving donations. A person like that, who's a judge, who's dependent on gifts and matanot, means that justice will not be done, and that will tear down a city. Leon, you're going to tell us something. I can tell by your look on your face.
Yes, I'm just looking at the verses surrounding this particular verse, and it's a list of comparisons, the good people and the wicked people. And there's about, well, I can see about 7 or 8 different comparisons about what happens to them through flattery and deception, through getting donations.
Yes. So it's telling us how to behave and how not to behave.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm interested in the translation of a haughty man. A haughty man tears it down. Why is ish trumot translated as haughty? What does the art scroll say on Proverbs?
A man of graft.
A man of graft. That's an interesting translation as well. Rashi tells us it very clearly. It's a priest who's asking for trumot in the threshing floors. All right. Anyway, our Gemarah is more interested in the first part of the pasuk, the easy part, and that is a king establishes the place with justice. So if we go back to our Gemarah, yes, Marcel?
Doesn't the word graft in English also mean a bribe?
Does it? Yes.
I have a suspicion it does.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Let me have a look and see what Dr. Google says. Graft, bribe, definition. Okay, here we go. Oh, it wants to know that I'm not a robot. Hang on. Yes. Graft is listen to this. This is interesting. Didn't know this. Graft is a form of political corruption that involves the misdirection of public funds by a government official for the benefit of private interests. I can't imagine anybody would do that. Can you? Graft is a form of political corruption that involves the misdirection of public funds by a government official for the benefit of private interests. Ein chadash tachat hashemesh. There is nothing new under the sun. Well, I didn't know that was the word graft. I've learned something there. Very interesting. What's the difference between bribery and graft? It says here, in graft, an intent improperly to influence official action need not be alleged or proved as it must be in bribery. Graft involves compensation for services performed in an official matter when no compensation is due. Graft contemplates personal advantage or gain in a dishonest transaction in relation to public duties. So that which we call bribery in political terms, which unfortunately there seems to be quite a lot of around these parts, is actually not bribery at all. It's graft. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
The
You
word,
want to
the
have a
word-
look? It's in
word-
Article 134, wherever that is. Fascinating. Really interesting. Thank you very much for that, Marcel.
the word graft for work may be slang. You know, we use the word is grafting very hard, but maybe that is slang and not the real meaning of the word.
Let's have a look and see what Dr. Google says. Let's put in graft and work and see what happens. Says it's got an error. Okay, I'll have to have a look at that later on. Okay, really interesting. Thank you for that, Marcel. Graft is a type of political corruption for personal gain. Very interesting. Right, let's have a look. Go back to Sanhedrin. Have you got the screen on by any chance? Yeah, okay, right. So, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, he says, Shoftecha is Melech and Kohen Gadol. Melech, why Melech? Why the king? Because of the pasuk we've just said. And why a Kohen Gadol? Well, this was from last week's Sedra, I believe. Seem to remember these words. Uvata el ha-kohenim alviyim vel ha-shofet asher yiyeh bayamim hahem. And you shall come to the Kohanim, the Leviim, and to the judge, asher yiyeh bayamim hahem, which will be in those days. I think I've got the psukim up and ready. Let's have a look. There we go. There it is. There's the psukim. Verse 9, Leon.
You shall come
I tell
to,
you what, let's go from verse 8 and we know what we're talking about.
if a matter of judgment is hidden from you, between blood and blood, between verdict and verdict, between plague and plague, matters of dispute in your cities, you shall rise up and ascend to the place that Hashem your God shall choose. You shall come to the Kohanim, the Levites, and to the judge who will be in those days. And you shall inquire, and they will tell you the word of judgment.
Okay, so again, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is using the word shoftecha, which is plural, to mean the king and the Kohen Gadol, because he's brought a pasuk using the word mishpat and shofet, both for the judge over here in Mishlei, a king establishes the country with justice, and also for a Kohen, uvata el Kohen alvim el shofet asher yeh b'yom hahem, v'darashta v'yigidu lecha et dvar mishpat. So the Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that we have at this procedure, this measuring procedure, we have the whole Sanhedrin, and we have a king, and we have a Kohen Gadol. Hard to imagine, really, isn't it, that was the case? But anyway, that's what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says in his Braita. Disagrees with our Mishnah, because our Mishnah doesn't mention anything about kings and Kohen Gadol. And if Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon believed that they needed to be there, for sure they would have dealt with that in this Mishnah, which they don't. So, Ibailahu, I'll ask you a question, says the Gemarah. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, bechada paleg, or betarte paleg. See, that word paleg sounds very similar to where I live and where some of you live. No, I think I'm the only one here that lives in Poleg. the rest of you live elsewhere. Anyway, I live in Poleg. So what's this word Paleg here mean in the Gemara? What does the word Paleg, what's Palga mean? David, tell us.
Dispute.
Yeah, it means to disagree. It means to argue with or to dispute, to disagree with. Why do you think that Poleg is called Poleg? Is it because we're always arguing with one another?
No, that would apply to wherever Jews live.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah, everywhere would be calling Poleg. No, that's not the answer. Why is Poleg called Poleg, do you think?
Dor Haflaga.
A Dor Haflaga, which was the generation that was spread out and was dispersed. Any other suggestions?
An argument is whether Poleg belongs to Netanya or to some other place.
Okay, all right. Don't think that's the reason either. There is something called Nachal Poleg.
Yeah,
What is Nachal Poleg?
it's a stream.
Yeah, it's a river, and the river splits the place. Okay, the river goes right down the middle, and so this river splits this yishuv. So it's Nachal Poleg. The river was called Poleg because it divided a certain area, and then when they made the area, it was around Nachal Poleg, and so they called it Ramat Poleg. Ramat meaning heights, as in Ramat HaGolan. So Poleg, the river Poleg, splits, like the River Thames is a Poleg, isn't it? It splits London in two. You've got north of the river and south of the river. So the Thames is also a Poleg. Right. Anyway, that's just a bit of language business. So the question that the Gemara is asking, yes, Marcel.
Strange it calls it Ramat when it's at the estuary.
Say that again.
Strange that it calls it Ramat when it's already at the estuary where it goes into the sea.
Well, it's not the heights. I suppose where Wingate is more on the heights of Poleg, isn't it? Really? I suppose you're right. Yes, never thought of that. Don't know why it's called Ramat Poleg, but there you are. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Bechada Poleg or Betarte Poleg? Does he disagree with our Mishnah on one issue or on two issues? B'melech b'Kohen Gadol Poleg. Does he disagree only with the requirement to have a king and a Kohen Gadol, i.e. the explanation of the word shoftecha, or aval b'Sanhedrin Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Shimon, or with regard to the Sanhedrin, does he hold like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, i.e. the number that you require? Or Dilma, or maybe the Sanhedrin Nami Poleg. Maybe he disagrees with them on the Sanhedrin as well. You remember, and I said this deliberately just before, I said that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov needed the whole Sanhedrin and the king and the Kohen Gadol. Well, the Gemara is asking the question now, is that the case? Does he require the whole Sanhedrin? We know he requires the king and the Kohen Gadol, he's told us. And he doesn't agree with Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, who do not require the king and the Kohen Gadol. But what about the Sanhedrin? This is the question now that this Gemara is asking. What is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion regarding the number of judges from the Sanhedrin that need to accompany the king and the Kohen Gadol? Does he, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, require the whole Sanhedrin? Or does he agree with Rabbi Shimon that he requires 3? Or does he agree with Rabbi Yehuda that he requires 5? Now, we're not going to get to the answer to that because time is up. Please God, next time we learn, we will have the answer to that question. The question raised being how many of these Sanhedrin judges does Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov think we need in addition to the Kohen Gadol and the king? We know Rabbi Shimon wants 3, Rabbi Yehuda wants 5. We're going to find next time how many this Tanna, this Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, I don't know if he's a Tanna actually, how many Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov requires. I think he is a Tanna. Okay, any questions on today's shiur? Yes, Jeffrey.
Is there any significance, or that they have to break the heifer's neck in the riverbed?
I think the whole thing's a bit peculiar, really. Maybe we need to learn Sota. Maybe it tells us that there. Does it, David? Yeah. Okay. So we'll have a look to answer your question. We'll have a look at Masechet Sota next time. Please remind me. Somebody, Leon, you're good at this. Remind me the day before the next shiur to go and learn up Masechet Sota, this chapter.
Yes, I've made a note. I think on what Jeffrey just said, it has to be a piece of land which is not cultivated or can't be cultivated. So that it partly explains.
That would fit, yeah. If it's in a riverbed, then that's somewhere you can't cultivate. Yeah, okay. Well, we'll learn more about that from Masechet Sota next week. It's no wonder we don't go very quickly, isn't it? But there you go. It doesn't matter. Any other points before we leave today? Okay. There will be no. Let's stop the recording now. I think Avril, if you don't, you can't. I will do it. Can I do it? Stop recording. Yeah, there we go.